Hello and welcome to the Messed Up to Setups podcast. I am comedian Michael Halcomb, and today I have the privilege of talking with Hawaii-based comedian the Joshua Valdez.
Everything seems so messed up, but it's just a setup.
Can I just call you Josh, or do you go by Joshua?
That's
Yeah.
absolutely fine.
All right. Man, it's good to see you. It's good to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
You as well, Michael. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, man.
You know, we've ran into each other a couple times at the mics around town. We seem to have the same vibe and the same feeling about the scene. And so I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So for those of you watching or listening, in this first part, we are going to jump into Josh's journey into comedy. And that'll be part one. We'll go on some fun tangents and things like that. Part two, we're going to just dive into jokes like we always do. And so let's start with that. Where and when rather did your journey into comedy start?
Well, it started 35 years ago on December 3rd. No, I'm just kidding. It actually started about 7 months and 4 days ago. Yeah, it was just the summer. I just lost my last professional job here in Hawaii, and I was kind of fed up with just working professionally, quite frankly. I'm working for someone else. I still work for someone else now, but being a comedian allows me to do something that's for myself. So I've been doing it for about 7 months, 4 days. But before then, just really living a life worth living and getting a sense of it all and trying to get a sense of who I was and just really drawing on those experiences now to try to find the funny in all of it.
Yeah, right on. So growing up, where did you grow up, by the way?
I grew up in Japan and Alabama. So I was born in Oregon. Yeah.
Yeah. Is
Born
that
in
like a
Oregon.
military thing? Were you part of a military family or what?
Yeah, my dad was in the Navy. Yeah, we grew up in Yokosuka, Japan, a naval base there. Shout out to Mark Hamill as he grew up there. There's a bust of him in the high school at Kinnick High School. So yeah, from Japan to Alabama, I moved to Alabama when I was 9 years old, and it was just as much culture shock as you can imagine.
Oh, wow. I'm getting ready to, I got a trip to Japan coming up. So it'll be my first time going. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, Japan to Alabama. And so a lot of your formative years then, like, did you say you were 9 years old when you moved to?
Oh yeah.
So how did you do? You did like middle school and high school in Alabama?
Yeah, after getting set up in Japan where it was like the most diverse culture, everything like that. Yes, I was on a military base, but they bussed in like 18 charter buses worth of Japanese students into our school system every day. I went from an elementary school, mind you, K through 6, of like 4,000 students to a high school, 7 through 12, of 250.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
That's a big difference going. I mean, numerically, it's a big difference. Geographically, crazy difference. But yeah, just the culture shock there. Did that mess you up? I mean, like, did you find adjusting easy? Was it difficult? I mean, what was that like?
The hardest adjustment, honestly, was just getting a sense of realizing that the everything was so big and then it went to so small, right? Where eventually it became to where like in the town, everyone knew your name, and it's just like, not so much knew your name, but knew your name and your business. And it was just something I didn't really grow to like at all. That's why I moved to New York, where I could just be incognito at all times.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, I one of my earliest jokes I tell is essentially my first day of 4th grade. It was, they bring me up to the front of the class and they're like, oh my God, he's Japanese. He doesn't look Japanese. He doesn't have the eyes like a Japanese. And it was just like, wait a second, this is 4th grade? A lot of people didn't realize that Asians was just a huge, vast number and different nationalities and sort. So it was, and also like Jap was colloquial, like just using that word for a 4th grader, it was like just saying, hey. So there was a lot of adjusting, but also one of the, like a core memory of mine is when we went to high school finally, rather, I should say, I started at one school and then the next year had to pivot right into another school because they closed the original one. The original one was all white, and the one that we had went to after that was literally like 85% black.
Interesting.
So in 2000, I remember just seeing and hearing about like what is just easily called race wars in Parrish, Alabama, because they integrated high schools. And I'm just like, we all watched Remember the Titans.
Man, so what would be the term there? Asia band? Like, I mean, that's interesting, man. To go from even just the food, right? Very different. Going from Japan to. So, how did you end up? I mean, at what point did you go to New York City? Was that after graduating high school?
That was some fun times, but we ended up finally finding a spot that was just amazing. Our third apartment, which was great. It was a loft, not a loft space, but a third floor, top floor of a Brooklyn walk-up that just had the best view of the city.
So then what brought you to Hawaii? You went from Japan to Alabama to Florida to New York. Where did Hawaii come into the picture?
So my mother's side of the family has lived in Hawaii since the late 80s. She relocated here with my stepfather, Pop, who they've been living here now since I believe it was like 2010 or something like that. So when COVID hit, I was working in television.
Wow. Interesting. And you moved here during COVID or just in the wake of COVID?
It was in that weird transitionary period of like towards the end and wake of COVID.
Okay.
Or not the wake, but towards the end of it, right? Because 2020 here, the booster shot, or not the booster shots, but the shots were going out and all that. So it was right in the 3/5 of it.
Gotcha. All right. So you show up in Hawaii and eventually you get into stand-up comedy. Now, you had mentioned this before we started recording that like you came to comedy sort of later into life, which is very similar to my own story. So at what age did you get into stand-up comedy? 34.
Going into 35. Yeah. July. So it was just time for a change. Like I had said kind of at the top of it that I had just been let go from my last professional job here in Hawaii. And I was kind of just fed up with life, with myself, with opportunity, and decided to start making opportunities for myself. You know, to say that I don't want to be famous feels ingenuine. That would be cool. But honestly, for me, comedy is that outlet that I had not yet found in my life to where I can, laugh at my pain, to use a line. So,
yeah. All right. So you start comedy at 34. You're a decade earlier than me, so good for you. I didn't start till I was, 43, 44, actually.
I don't.
And I've been at it about 8 or 9 months. And so you're going on 7 to 8 months. So we're kind of like in the same time frame relatively as far as starting within like the past year, right? What has the journey been like so far?
Man, it's been a whirlwind, honestly, of just realizing that something that I don't tell a lot of aspiring comedians is you're not funny. They tell us that all the time. It's these aren't funny because there's no actual punchline. What you think is funny in your head is because you've got all the pieces and stuff already put together. Now you need to go essentially speak to an audience that has no idea of how you're wired and how you've put it all together in your head to make it funny to yourself. You now need to, it's kind of gross, take that and chomp it down into little baby pieces that you can then bird feed to the audience, right? And make sure that those things punch and that they're funny, because that's what we're meant to do, is be funny.
Yeah. Well, I think that one thing I've noticed is, especially with newer comedians, but even comedians who've been at it a while, like there are a lot of people who are their personality is funny. When they get up on stage, that can only last so long and get you so far. Like actual joke writing and joke structure has to come in at some point. And so to your point, I think the number one thing that I see are premises or setups, really kind of like people saying setups that might be a little funny, but no punchline to follow.
Exactly. That was actually my hardest thing before with my writing coach and just reading some of my old stuff, is I had funny setups. There was never a punch. Sorry to step on your toes there, but yeah.
I think that, I see a lot of, like, I'm sure you keep some sort of notebook. I keep a notebook. I keep a digital notebook. I always have the phone with me so I can take a note or something like that. But I have a whole list right now. It's probably 200. It's titled Jokes That Need Written. And all that list is just a list of 200 funny ideas to me. Like, there is no setup yet. There is no punchline. but it's just, oh, that's a funny idea. And it may be years before any of those ideas like see and daylight in an actual joke. And they may never but people a lot of times just come up on stage with a funny idea, and there's nothing wrong with that if you're trying to work it out, right? But I do see that a lot, exactly what you're talking about. So you mentioned you got a writing buddy or a writing mentor.
Yeah. Writing mentor, writing coach, Adam Gable, who was someone I was working with him back in the city. He was just starting his comedy career. Now it's like 7 years later or so. And I've kind of leaned to him to kind of get me jump started into writing. And yes, you do have funny setups, but none of this is actual punchlines. Like those were our first, for I'd say the first 6 weeks or so that I worked with him. He's like, this is good stuff. And, you know, here and there, I'd find a punchline. He'd be like, blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. So through working with him, I come to realize that, yeah, personality only gets you so far, and that you need actual punchlines. You need them to be, if they can't be relatable, then they need to be just so punchy that you can't miss it.
Yeah. Has doing stand-up comedy for the last 7 or 8 months, how has that affected your confidence?
It's gone up, honestly, in weird ways and odd ways, in some ways that I didn't think it would. On stage before, I'll probably share with you after we record today, my first set I'll share, and then my first competition set, and then my second competition set. All 3 of those were off. But you can see that in those sets, the different set of nerves that I had going on. And now I'm just cool and calm as a cucumber. What might be only funny to me about that is when I shared those videos with some friends and other comedian friends and Adam as well, they all had the same comment of, you look incredibly relaxed and calm up there. And I'm like, you can't tell that I am nervous to the gills? Yeah. You're
able to somehow, if not turn that off, because it doesn't sound like it was turned off, you're able to...
In a room. They don't laugh. You know, the work that we do as stand-up comedians, going to mic is going to the gym, right? We do that to then go, once we do get a feature show or a feature showcase, or we get a club spot or anything like that, we are funny on the stage, that it matters, right? But when we hit those mics, we're going there for us to figure out what words work, what punchline works, what timing works, what's the crowd actually laughing at throughout that premise, setup, and punchline, right? Is our cadence better slow here and then fast? How do we use our hands? You know, I'm going to review some tape of my opener set that I just did this weekend and see where I can actually develop more as a performer and not just be a good writer and orator, which is what I feel I am right now.
Do you have some background? You mentioned you had production stuff. You had background in public speaking?
I've always been a good public speaker. I don't necessarily like doing it at all. For the longest time growing up, every time I'd be in a public speaking class, whether it be in primary school or college or post-grad, all my professors would say, Josh, why do you close your eyes so much? And I'd be like, oh, it's because I wrote the notes on the back of my eyelids. No, it's because honestly, I can't. It's not that I can't stand people looking at me, but as we know that I have Asperger's, right? It really freaks me the frick out to do that, to just be up here and be telling my story, and then just have people full attention to me, which is so counter and crazy, because if you think about it, comedians are just like gentle narcissists, because we literally want to go up on a stage and talk about ourselves or say things that make us be admired and the sort, right? But I'm up there like, I just want to be seen but heard, but could you close your eyes? It's a really weird dynamic for me internally that I still haven't figured out.
I think that is an interesting thing. I mean, to be a comedian, there has to be some ego, right?
Yeah.
There just has to be. To think that you, of all people on the planet, can get up in front of a room full of strangers and make them laugh about whatever you're saying. There's some ego.
100%. You know,
I find that interesting because I don't tend to think of myself as narcissistic or egotistical or anything like that. And just my day to day, I'm confident in who I am, but I'm not self-centered. I don't think the world revolves around me. But dude, there's definitely a little bit of crazy in you when you think you can get up in front of everybody, a room full of strangers, and make them laugh.
Right.
There's some crazy there.
100%.
And theory behind, I'm a linguist. right? I did one of my master's degrees is master in linguistics, and
Would you say you're a cunning linguist?
I am very kind of, yeah, yeah, yeah. But like that I'm dialed into language, and I always have been, dude. When I was a kid, I got hooked into hip hop, like rap music. That is where the obsession started for me. I don't know if you ever heard of Bone Thugs and Harmony, this rap
Yeah.
group. Yeah, most people have.
KRS-One, have you heard of him?
Yes, exactly. I mean, so I started listening to Bone Thugs and they rap really fast, right? That's what, and that got me really just hooked in. So I did 5 degrees, and 4 of them in biblical studies, 1 in linguistics. But my focus on, like, I've worked with 13 languages. I've studied 13 languages, and just that, yeah, the hyperfixation on languages and how language is used and words. And when I come to stand-up comedy, I'm bringing sort of like that baggage and that lens, that filter, right? Like, and I am dialed into how the words work, how the comedians use word, like, so all this theory behind comedy really just like fascinates me. And I think that's weird to a lot of people, like, especially comedians.
Not weird to me at all.
No,
No, I find myself to be a cunning linguist as well. Wordsmith, even.
Yeah, I mean the wordsmithing, like that really, I'm sort of taken over by that. Like I said, there's a magicalness, if that's a word, there's a magicalness to that. Oh man, a word well used, a word well placed, a word well manipulated, like all that stuff, dude. Just I don't know, have a deep appreciation for that. And yeah, comedy's like an endless array of that. In studying biblical studies and ancient language, like I teach Greek and Hebrew and like these kind of things. Yeah, so I'm bringing that sort of filter, and then overlay that with just the crazy of, I think I can do this. I think I can get up in front of people and say something in a funny way and make them laugh. There's a little bit of crazy there. I went skydiving a few years ago on my 40th birthday. Yeah.
How was
4
that?
years ago. And I jumped out of a plane up on the North Shore at about 14,500 feet. And there's something similar there with stand-up comedy for me. Like, it's just that boldness to just go up on a stage in front of random people and think, like, I can do this. Or I can make them laugh, or I can bomb and it isn't the end of the world or whatever. You saw me bomb just a week ago or so. It's not the end of the world. Like, it happens. But that kept me out of comedy for years, that fear of bombing. I'm wondering, like, has that messed with you at all along the way? How have you been able to deal with the bombing aspect?
That's a good question, because I would, in any other environment where we have a scene where we could do multiple mics a night, I would say something to the effect of, when I bomb, I just go to the next mic and do my thing again, right? When I bomb and they're really, really bad, I just put it out the window. I do my best to not think about it at all. Think about the next mic, get ready for the next mic, because that's what we do as comedians, right? You have a mic, whether if it's good or bad or whatever, you're only as good as your last mic. So if you're good on your mic before that, go up and be better, right? And if you bomb on that one, then go up and be better than that on the next one. That's kind of my philosophy to it. It does no good to dwell in the past.
Wow. So I don't know. I'm always looking. I'm super curious about how people get into comedy and how they deal with, because it can be harsh, dude. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We were talking about some of that the other night. Like, there can be pretty harsh parts, like, in the comedy journey, right? And you have to find ways to cope with that and to deal with that. I wrote a blog post recently, dude. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's called the let them theory. Let
them. I think I saw something about. I think I saw your Instagram post on it. Yeah. And I yes, that is the mentality. Absolutely. If they want to do that, let them.
Exactly. So it's got another part too. It's a let me. So right, there's the first part, like, let them, and then let me. So like if people don't want to laugh, let them. Let me keep trying. If people don't want to support me, let me find people who do, right? And it's just that you can't just do the let them and stop there. There has to be the corresponding let me, right? Somebody wants to be a prick, let them. Let me build other people up, so on and so forth. I've found that tremendously helpful. Yeah.
Yep. Imagine if Andy Kaufman was what's the word that I'm looking for now? Like crippled or just absolutely unable to do anything because he just hung on the thought of what did they think of me? You know what I mean?
Right.
So
We'll start to wrap up this episode in a minute, but
Sure.
we want to talk more about jokes. But here at the end, I want to sort of start to segue into that a little bit. I want to hear, I'm curious about, do you just write whenever? What's that like for you as a comedian?
when I first started, I had something of a writing routine where I'd go to the same Starbucks, sit in the same chair, and just write in my book what I thought was funny about myself, the world, blah, 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 blah. Nowadays, I have a set that I'm working on that I really want to hone in because it's it can become a very tight 15, and then I can probably add another 10 to it once I figure out how to make this long bit funny. It's actually more in and of itself a chunk. But the process now for me is honestly, when I have a thought that I think is funny, write it down or speak it into my microphone on my phone and then just go about the day. Because there was a time when I first started where I would just obsess with like, no, I have to write 10 jokes today. They all have to be funny, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, just write, dude. Don't make this a job for yourself. Make this a passion, right? That you express and that you feel fully when it moves through you. If that doesn't make me sound too hippie-ish.
I mean, that's interesting. You don't want to burn yourself out, and it's easy to do. I've found that happening to me within the last week, like trying to like post on social media and like keep the streak going. Bro, it can get exhausting.
Yeah.
So I try to write at least one joke a day, and I've set up a Twitter and X account specifically for that. Like I post a
I have
daily.
the same.
Yeah. I post a daily joke on X. It's usually like pop culture, politics, something like that. And, I'll let that sit. Now, I try to write. A lot of times I use that as a jump start for writing, other stuff or going back. Like you, I have a bit right now that I'm working on, and I'm trying to get it into just a tight 3 minutes.
Jeez.
And then I have another bit that's 2 minutes. And I want to be able to connect the two for a 5-minute bit. But I just started working on this 3-minute bit last week. So it's only a week old. But I love the advice of, like making it a passion versus, making it a chore. I think that's why, because it's easy to get burned out.
Yeah, absolutely. I do the same with X as well. X is actually, I meant to mention it to you the other day. You just said it now and I'm mirroring a little bit, but I call it Twitter. And I am vehemently against X because it just sounds weird, man. It sounds like you're just a drug addict on ecstasy all the time, right? I was on X the other day and saw this, and you're just like, wait a second, what?
Oh, man.
As a former pharmaceutical rep of the streets, we call X something completely different.
Okay. So you're on X or Twitter actively? Like you're on there?
Semi-actively, when I have what I think is just a stupid or dumb something to say, I'll put it onto Twitter, and once I hit post, if I'm like, it makes me giggle, then I'll keep it. But if it doesn't, then I typically throw it into the drafts. Okay. But I try to do it onto Twitter, back to the writing advice and just writing kind of regiment. I try to start on Twitter because and I don't pay for like an X account or whatever, or Twitter like long form account. Yeah. So you can only use 240 characters. And I think as comedians starting out, that's a very good exercise to hit either a premise and a setup and a punchline, or a premise / setup where it's all in one and then your punchline, right? It really teaches you word economy.
Right. Right. Well, I got it up on the screen right now for those who are watching. They can follow you on Insta at the.Joshua Valdez-Aldridge. And you have an X. What is do we have an address on that? What's the handle for that?
I believe that is at JVA Comedy.
Okay, so I'll pull that up here. So we have at JVA.comedy. Let me see if I can find that.
No dot, just straight or JVA Comedy. My bad.
All right. If I can pull that up here in the interim. So do I just put that in the search? JVA comedy. I think I found you. Yeah, here we go. So this will be another place that folks who are watching or listening, they can follow you on here.
Those are absolutely just straight up first draft jokes. And then like commentary on the world, but like
yeah. All right, yeah. So you're doing some current events, pop culture as well. So right on. So I'll follow you on there.
sweet, thanks.
Yeah, I didn't even know you were on there. But yeah, you guys head over to X or Twitter and hit up at JVA Comedy. And on Insta, d.Joshua Valdez-Aldridge, and you can follow what Josh is doing here. Dude, it's been good to, you vanished there for a second, but we'll make some jokes up on the spot, and that'll be part 2. So, Josh, man, thanks for coming. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. It's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to diving into some jokes with you. And looking forward to seeing all the folks out and having some laughs.
Yeah, man. And thanks to everybody for watching or listening to the Messed Up to Set Up podcast. Grateful for that. Head over to MichaelHalcomb.Live. You can follow me on Insta at MichaelHalcomb.Live, or X is just Halcomb Live, on Facebook at MichaelHalcomb.Live, and all these sorts of things. So MichaelHalcomb.Live, check that out as well. We're going to stop there and say we hope that helped.
It's so messed up, yeah. Everything's messed up. We're going from this mess up to the next setup. Everything seems so messed up, but it's just